And now we're going to proceed to the next session with a video presentation that my colleague, Dr. Sidra, will be introducing. Sidra, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
And specifically via the Leadership Training Peace and Security Program.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, His Excellency Dr. Salim Al-Malik, Ms. Ramata, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this panel on inspiring peace, words from global leaders. We often think of peace as the absence of conflict or violence. I think the concept of peace is more complex. Excuse me. This is because there is the scientific understanding and the practice of peace. Peace is also as concord, harmony, and tranquility. Globally, there is an International Day for Peace, which reminds us the fragility of peace and the importance to continue advocating the peace around the world, including in the Islamic world. Thank you. When it comes to international peace, it is important to build a more peaceful and prosperous world through independent analysis and action by addressing global challenges. Global threats such as coronavirus pandemic, climate change, and radicalization are transforming the world today. As essential truth has emerged, technological advances are outstripping political capacity and imagination. As it is said, peace is more important than all justice. It is pertinent to understand more about this concept of peace. For example, why is peace so important, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, and how it is going to be important in the post-COVID period. We are privileged to have Professor Azza Karam, who has kindly recorded a message for us. Professor Azza Karam serves as the Secretary General of Religions for Peace, the largest multi-religious leadership platform with 92 national and 6 regional inter-religious councils. She is a citizen of Netherlands and holds a professorship of religion and development at the Vrije University in Amsterdam. So now let's listen to her message.
Greetings to my brothers and sisters convened so very graciously by Ísisco and specifically by the Leadership Training Peace and Security Program. I am deeply honored to be with you today, and I am deeply sorry that I cannot physically, meaning even through Zoom, be able to be with you in a more interactive fashion. Please excuse me, but we are in different time zones and I was unable to fully be with you. My heart is with you, as is very much my spirit, given the themes that you are discussing today. Before I begin, please allow me to pay special tribute to a unique and generous of heart, mind, and spirit leader of Islamic Ísisco. I refer specifically to Professor Dr. Salim Al-Malik. I'm not saying this because it's important to pay tribute and be polite. I'm saying this because this is a man who's doing a tremendous amount of good work for men and women across the Muslim world. Every such person is unique and precious, and every such person deserves to be honored. We should never take for granted the work of our leaders. We should instead learn how to complement rightly, justly, the hard work that many of our leaders undertake in order to position us in a space where we can live better as humanity. It is not an easy job. And I, for one, am very, very grateful to both Dr. Salim and his expert team, who has been very instrumental in allowing me this opportunity to be with you. I refer particularly to Dr. Ramata Mbai. So, greetings to all of you. I said all this without telling you who I am. I serve as the Secretary General of Religions for Peace, which is the world's largest multi-religious leadership coalition dedicated towards serving together the mission of peace writ large. Peace as in decency, health, dignity, education, everything to do with peace. Peace of heart, mind, and body. 51 years ago, a group of religious leaders came to found this organization because they were worried about what our political establishments were doing. They felt that the political establishments needed the goodwill and guidance, not of only one religious leader or only one religion, but these religious leaders together 51 years ago felt that the political establishments of our world required that they come together as religious leaders from across the different religious spectrum, the multi-religious imperative, as opposed to the religious imperative. The multi-religious imperative is the tipping point for survival. I believe very firmly in this. I believe very firmly that all those who believe and who don't believe, when they work together, inspired by their faith, truly, the sky's the limit in terms of goodness and kindness and generosity and decency. And it is almost impossible for any kind of evil to come in between. When all the world's religions work together, the divine is present. I believe in that. And this is the mission of Religions for Peace. It has demonstrated over 51 years that this mission works and can save lives. And may well be saving a few spirits as well. I want to pay special tribute to the ISISCO colleagues for ensuring, quite frankly, that we are able to proclaim 2021. Thank you to the Director General. We proclaim 2021 as the Year of Women. Not a small achievement for the largest Islamic institution serving the Muslim world and the rest of the world today. Very big achievement. It is important to be able to pay tribute, but also to acknowledge, quite frankly, that as phenomenal a move as this is, to declare 2021 as the Year of Women, this is a phenomenal move. It's a phenomenal move because it is actually quite necessary. All faith traditions teach us that reciprocity towards one another is the basis of mercy and decency. Reciprocity is a very critical part of serving and service. We give, but we also need as human beings to receive. So therefore, reciprocity between us as human beings, reciprocity between institutions, reciprocity between nations is fundamental. And we are seeing how problematic it is now when we're looking at the distribution and dissemination of the vaccine. Reciprocity is a basic principle in all faiths. And it's something that, unfortunately, many cultures either take for granted and don't celebrate enough, or don't even realize exists. Fortunately, those who celebrate it are women. And Ísísco is demonstrating this reciprocity towards all the women of the world by declaring this year the Year of Women, because all the women of the world have served in so many ways, incredibly. And the COVID-19 disaster has highlighted how the front lines of every single community are usually populated by women. We owe women all over, girls and women, we owe them that debt of honor. So this is why I think Ísísco's declaration is very, very good. Why do you see a link between religion, peace, and security? I'm often asked. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that our faiths, in most part of the world, our faiths actually determine why we behave the way we do and how we behave, why we say certain things and how we think about certain things. With the exception of Western Europe, the rest of the world is religious. That means, and I refer to a 2012, I believe, Pew Pew study that identified that 84% of the world's people, or that noted that 84% of the world's people are actually affiliated or claim a certain affiliation with religion. 84%. Yes? So if you think about it, that means that 8 out of 10 people profess, claim, identify with a certain faith, religion. Given that particular statistic, how is it that we're supposed to do peace without acknowledging and affirming and recognizing and integrating and embracing faith and religions? How? How can we put religion aside, in fact, in any space of human life? But especially, how can we put religion aside when even conflicts that have nothing to do with religion, absolutely nothing to do with religion, suddenly, over time, become redefined as religious? Yes, we are seeing that happen. That shouldn't happen, but it is happening. Religion is so topical that even conflicts get to be redefined as religious conflicts when they have nothing to do with the faith. Given that particular reality, it's quite important that we integrate, at a minimum, an appreciation or an understanding that faith matters. Okay? That religions matter. There's also another fact. If it's not just how we think and how we feel and how we behave that is impacted by our religious traditions and our faith beliefs, if it's not just the fact that as believers, we see that religions somehow get mired in conflict dynamics, but it is also perhaps the fact that almost at the conservative estimate, almost 30% of social services around the world, and by that I mean education and healthcare, a minimum of 30% of basic healthcare, everywhere in the world, on average, a minimum of 30% of basic healthcare is provided through religious institutions. That's just the healthcare, okay? So you can well imagine in the height of this COVID disaster that the front line, the health systems of the world, at a minimum 30% of those are managed by religious institutions. So even if we don't like religion, even if we don't get the link between that and peace, if we forget the fact that, health is important to peace, let's just forget that for a second. Even if we do that, we have to acknowledge that the providers of health, 30% of them are religious institutions and religious bodies. طيب. Now, let's think of education. I'm Egyptian. I'm a Muslim. I went to a Catholic school. I'm not the only one. My sisters and brothers elsewhere in the world have been brought up in madrasas. Why? Because actually, religious institutions are the original schools. They were the original places that created schools. The first universities, as we know them today, Al-Azhar al-Sharif, is a university. It's a religious institution. So actually, when we think of social services, basic social services around the world, we realize, and we have to realize, that the oldest social service providers known to humankind are religious institutions. So we ignore that. That's got nothing to do with peace. It has everything to do with peace. Where we go for our shot, where we go to learn about one another, about our world, about ourselves, about our religion, those places matter, and they matter deeply. Those people who run them, the institutions that run them, therefore matter and should matter deeply. It doesn't mean that we all have to become religious. That's not what I'm saying. It doesn't mean that we must look at the world now through the prism of nothing but religion. No, it just means being strategic and pragmatic about the how our world functions. So if we speak about the agency of human beings, we understand that religions inspire, that religious institutions teach. We understand that in so many different ways, religions matter. Now note, religions. At no point have I spoken about any one religion. The day we prioritize any one religion over another is the day we sign the death warrant of our humanity. No, I am not saying religion matters. I am saying all religions matter in very strategic ways. That if we want to be savvy, informed, policymakers, guides, advisors, coaches, parents, that if we want to be savvy, we must appreciate the role of the religious institutions and the religious beliefs altogether in our lives today. That being able to secure a peace document means being able to be respectful and sensitive to the needs, the positions, the dimensions, the dynamics, and the environment. That sensitivity, that very basic requirement of peace building and peacemaking, that sensitivity in almost all cases is informed by our position and understanding of religion and faith. Faiths give us our sensitivities or the lack thereof. Therefore, faiths matter, religions matter. When we speak of bringing a space of faith and peace, we have to understand that it's human beings who are ultimately the determinants of everything. We've often found that in situations of crises, whether they are man-made or environmental, those who are vulnerable become more vulnerable. Those who are marginalized become more marginalized. Crises often bring out the worst in our political, social, cultural, financial dynamics. They also bring out the best. COVID is a very living example of this reality. As we live through COVID, we see the best of who we are and we see the worst of who we are simultaneously. It is absolutely important to understand that every single religion calls upon us to look after the most vulnerable amongst us. That is not a requirement of law. That is a requirement of faith. Faiths tell us that we must look after the most vulnerable amongst us, that we must acknowledge the most vulnerable amongst us, and that in doing so, we give agency to those around us. When we acknowledge that in almost all cases of conflict situations, in all cases of humanitarian crises, women tend to be the ones receiving the hardest brunt, bearing the hardest brunt of the crises. When we acknowledge and when we reach out to include and integrate the experiences, the voices, the presence, the insights of women in our societies, we are not doing them a favor. We are making our lives better. We are honoring parts of us. We are ensuring a stronger representation, capability, power at the peacemaking table. Women are agents of peace, just as they can be agents of war. But women who suffer in situations of conflict are also the ones who can speak to it and help resolve the sources of the suffering and the sources of the conflict. You cannot rebuild without women. But in order to rebuild, you must first see the damage, understand the scope, engage to serve. Women are agents of peace building and peacemaking. And just as faith inspires humanity, women inspire reality. And this is the message that I want to leave you with, because it's one of the lessons we're learning in Religions for Peace. We realized a very sad thing, in addition to all the other sadnesses in this crisis of COVID. We realized that as hard as religious institutions and communities were serving, and each one is serving tremendously hard as they're serving, the willingness to serve together, the willingness to pool our resources together as different religions, as different religious institutions, that willingness isn't always there. Because the focus is on our own, as it should be. But if our own are the most vulnerable, and if our own are to survive, we must look beyond our own. Because no one person is safe if one person is not safe. The community cannot live when its own members are in pain. Our nations, our planet will not survive if there are those in pain. COVID isn't distinguishing between one human being and the other. Why are we distinguishing when we think of our decisions and our priorities and our accessibilities? Why are we distinguishing? We cannot afford to distinguish. And if we cannot afford to distinguish, we must understand that the pain of one is the pain of all, that the victory of one is the victory of all, or should be. We set up the Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund and Religions for Peace because we are inspired by precisely what ISESCO is inspired by. In all the efforts for leadership and in peace and security, we're inspired by the same principle, that we serve one another regardless of the color of our skin, the nature of our identity, the nationality we have, or the faith that we adopt. We serve together, all of them, all and each. We serve together for all. We don't distinguish. That is the agency of peacemaking and peace building. And that is the position that tends to come very naturally, by the way, to many women. As they give life, they learn that life is given to one and all, or taken from one and all. Women's agency in peace building cannot be disputed and has to be actively supported, pioneered. But at the same time, we must understand that faith moves mountains. And it is important that our faiths come together to move together, all the mountains that we have. It is important that we serve. We serve one, we serve all. But it is important that we serve together. When religions come together to serve all, fundamentalism of any kind will have no space. Violence of any kind will have no need. We serve better our common human existence when we come together as peoples of many faiths and no faiths. But when we serve together as inspired by our faiths, we can do so much. Let's make sure we do that. Thank you.
We would like to thank Professor Aiza Karam for that insightful, illuminating, and impressive message. In her message, we can see how Professor Aiza Karam is a beacon for peace and a staunch proponent for interfaith dialogue and intercultural engagement. She can serve as an inspiration for all of us to promote peace through dialogue, engagement, and empowerment. The valuable points made in her speech are aligned with the values and objectives of ISESCO in promoting peace, solidarity, dialogue, and cultural diversity. I fully concur with Professor Aiza's perspective, as was encapsulated in her video message. I hope you enjoyed it. Now we will take 10 minutes coffee break. Thank you very much for listening.